There we go, Owen. We are back with our next panel. Owen is going to be our moderator. He's the founder of Arigo Investments. We're talking about understanding our past and building the Africa we want.
So, guys, I just want to thank you for being with us at Smarter Mobility Africa Live 2020. And I'll do a quick intro, or perhaps let me get each of the panelists to do a quick intro. I'll give you guys. I'll start with Jay. Jay is based in Canada. Jay is the CEO of an investment company that's based in Toronto. That's listed on the TSX in Canada. Jay, can I ask you to do a quick intro and tell us about the work you are doing?
Sure. Thanks, Owen. First of all, I'm based in Vancouver, but I'm not offended that you said Toronto. Good people in Toronto there. But I work as a merchant bank based here in Vancouver.
Sorry about that.
And we have an office, a partner office in Hong Kong and London as well. We're focused on mining, energy, and technology.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jay. I appreciate you being here. And Linda, could I ask you, Linda, to introduce yourself? Linda is a business development executive with CEOGA, based in the Eastern Cape in Port Elizabeth, and home to several OEMs or manufacturers of automobiles here in South Africa, including a recent addition, which was, I think, near 5 billion rand by Bank of China and FAW of China. So perhaps, Linda, you could do a quick intro of yourself and the work you're doing at CEOGA.
Thanks, Owen. Afternoon, everyone. I am Linda Sithyoshwana, and as Owen has noted, I'm in business development for the CEOGA SZ. My specialties are really logistics, project development from a transshipment hub perspective. Thanks, Owen.
Sure, fantastic. Thank you for that, Linda. And Abdel, can I ask you, Abdelaziz, to give us a bit of a background? Abdel is with Afreximbank, also, in fact, better known as Africa Import and Export Bank. And they are based in Egypt and have several offices across Africa. And Abdel is responsible for strategy, which strategy also incorporates the industrial strategies around automation and automotive industry. Abdel, can I ask you to give us a quick intro?
Hello, Owen. Sorry, Owen. So I was out. I just reconnected. Could you please repeat?
Okay. Can you just give us a quick introduction of who you are and the work that you are doing at Afreximbank?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And thanks for the inspiring presentation, Owen. So I work for the Afreximbank, the African Export-Import Bank, which is a Pan-African multilateral development bank that has the mandate of promoting and expanding inter- and extra-African trade, so trade within Africa and with the rest of the world. So it's a bank, it's an Exim bank, a model of Exim banking that provides funded and unfunded facilities to our sovereign and corporate as well as financial institutions clients, in addition to advisory, capital markets, and trade information, just to name a few. So recently, in 2020, the bank launched a new strategy called the Afreximbank Automotive strategy. So this is very much in line with the topic of electric vehicles of today. And the objective of this strategy is to support the emergence of a strong African automotive industry. We work with many partners in that regard. So the strategy is already there, approved, shared, and now we start the execution phase. We work with the AAAM, the African Association of Automotive Manufacturers, with the African unions, with the large OEMs, and we are ready to transform the landscape of African automotive sector. Thank you. So I'll talk later to the pillars of the strategy and also some of our financing initiatives under that regard. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Abdelaziz. and we are also very pleased to have you here. The work you are doing across the continent is absolutely phenomenal. I might note that Afreximbank is actually doing a lot of work in countries where ordinarily the big lenders would not do work. So a country like Zimbabwe, for example, whose credit rating is, I think, down in the dumps right now, is one of the countries that has benefited from the support of Afreximbank. You've got countries like South Sudan, where Afreximbank is doing work. And this bank is owned by African banks, and there's a few other shareholders, but African governments are the ones that have put money in to get this bank up and running. So great work, guys, and I anticipate that I think the next couple of years, we're going to see a phenomenal rise in intra-Africa trade with the work that you're doing. Can you perhaps talk to that, Abdul?
Yes, of course. You know, we are now implementing our fifth strategic plan until 2021. And the arrowhead of our strategy for this 5-year strategic planning period is the promotion of inter-African trade. And in that regard, we've been working with the African Union and other partners, mainly towards achieving the objectives set for the African Continental Free Trade Area, the AfCFTA. We managed over the past 4 or 5 years to increase the share of inter-African trade financing in our portfolio to about 25% from 5 or 6, and we aim to support the continental efforts for inter-African share rising from 15% or 16% from total African trade now to 24 or 25% in the next couple of years. So great work has been done, but we still need to make efforts. It's only by trading among ourselves. So if we take the example of Asia or Europe, the regional trade is the guarantee that we will develop, that we will find the local markets where we can sell and buy our African products. We also have major initiatives, which is the inter-African trade fair. This is a big continental initiative. So in 2018, it was the maiden edition. The 2020 edition, the second one, was postponed to September 2021. It is co-organized by the African Union and the government of Rwanda in Kigali between the 1st and the 7th of September 2021. That's maybe one of the major initiatives that will drive the efforts of inter-African trade in the context or under the umbrella of the AfCFTA. I may talk to it later if you want further details. So for the audience.
Yeah. Let me just perhaps from there, I'd like to jump to Linda. Thank you so much for that expose. So for those of you listening, Afreximbank is hosting an intra-Africa trade fair in 2021. And the objective of that is to expand on the strategy of intra-Africa trade. So to just throw some thoughts and ideas there, everything from the mining of battery minerals or energy metals across the different African countries, and how the different countries that have capacity to process those minerals, you can imagine the volume of trade that can happen with, for example, cobalt being processed, being mined in the Congo, and then being pushed out to another African country for processing. And instead of shipping everything out to either China, to Europe, US, or Australasia, a certain amount of material is retained by Africa for our own production purposes and for our own innovative opportunities. So, Linda, while I'm there, you obviously are involved in business development, not just in South Africa, but in different African countries. So 20 years ago plus, CEOGA was formed, and I think it started and people didn't believe in it. It started, and 2 decades later, it's one of the most successful industrial development zones. Can you tell us what was the magic thing?
Thanks, Owen. I think for us, Owen, what differentiates us was our ability to first start with our infrastructure. I think that is a key barrier from an African perspective. In that we know that from a road perspective, a rail perspective, even seaports perspective, we're far behind the developed world. And therefore, for us, it was important that prior to us being able to attract the investments that we today enjoy, that we put those things in place. It has taken a bit of time. In fact, from an SEZ development perspective, I think we've done really well. The project was estimated at a development phase of 50 years. We're 20 years old now, and we are at the stage whereby right now we've got our bulk infrastructure in. We have created a plug-and-play environment that makes it easy for investors to find value in what we offer. Thanks.
And I can certainly say I do not think that BAKE of China, BAKE is one of the largest automakers in China, and BAKE has invested in KUGA. And out of interest, what does KUGA stand for? What does it actually mean?
KUGA is actually a river that runs at behind our SEZ. So it is a spring that runs through us, and that's how we have been named.
Well, let's hope that between yourselves, Afreximbank, you are a spring for the future of this continent, a spring of everything innovative for innovation and growth. I'd like to jump onto, I don't know if Greg has eventually joined us, but is Greg on? Okay, we'll skip that question for Greg, but maybe we can jump to Jay. So Jay, you've been mining, investing in mining of energy metals for the last 20 years, and you've successfully raised pockets of stash across the entire world for different energy metals. Do you want to give us a synopsis of what you think needs to happen in Africa for us to move into the industrialization phase of the continent that uses the fourth industrial revolution to take the continent forward? But of particular note, I want you to look at the minerals that are in demand by Tesla, by VW, by all the big automakers, by NIO, the Chinese companies, Rivian, the big EV who's just got 10,000 or a unit order of up to 10,000 units from Amazon for their delivery trucks. Can you give us an idea of what the global demand is going to look like and what the opportunity for copper, for manganese, for nickel, for graphite, for lithium and cobalt? Can you give us an idea of what the opportunity is or the funding gap that is potentially sitting within Africa, which creates that opportunity?
Yeah, thank you, Owen. Well, the real challenge here that everybody has to understand is, from our perspective, we look at the entire supply chain from raw material all the way down to application. And the real issue is, while you have lots of sex appeal and lots of interest in electric cars, the problem is that there's been over $300 billion invested in applications, and we have underinvestment in raw material. So around the world, I consistently hear of leaders talking about moving to a non-carbon 2050, and electric vehicles are their primary objective in that strategy. Yet none of them talk about the raw materials that are going to be required in order to build that infrastructure and those automobiles. Yeah, and in Africa, you know, I don't have to really necessarily go into what it takes, I think, because Owen, I think you really covered that really well in your presentation. Africa is blessed right now because it has all the aspects that are required. You know, skilled resources from human resources, raw material, infrastructure, you know, innovation from the youth and all the people that are coming up. And in many regards, you're also blessed where you're not have to, you know, a lot of this is for the first time. It's not replacing necessarily existing infrastructure or opportunity. It's creating it. So from the raw material perspective, Africa's also got most of the raw materials that are required to build these products. And really, when I refer to the amount of investment going into the application and the underinvestment happening in raw materials, the biggest thing facing all automakers right now for battery electric vehicles is securing their supply chain. China has done that, and China is way ahead of every other country in the world. In terms of technology and cars, Tesla is way ahead of everybody, but China's secured their supply chain. So one of the most critical elements in the battery, of course, is cobalt. Cobalt is what makes the battery essentially stable. And 85% roughly of that comes out of the DRC, and 85% of what comes out of the DRC goes to China. So it is a critical component. Much of its production comes as a byproduct to nickel and copper as well. But you have everything that you require in terms of raw materials in the supply chain existing on the continent.
Wow, Jay, I think that's quite an expose. I mean, if you've just mentioned a percentage there of 85% of all cobalt, what does that mean for the security of, or what can I say, the tenure, the security of tenure for the auto industry insofar as the future is concerned? I mean, what is Tesla saying? I mean, if they need that cobalt, is this not what gives rise to the sort of trouble we're seeing between the United States of America and the Republic of China? Is it not quite possibly the key reason that we're starting to see trade wars emerge?
Well, the key reason for trade war is because of trade imbalance. But certainly, you know, the United States has put out a list, as they do just about every year, of 35 elements that are critical that they're dependent on other countries for. A good example of all this and what's really occurring is rare earth elements. There's only, with rare earth elements, which are critical to so many technologies, China controls the market. They produce 95% of the rare earth elements for the world. The raw material can come from anywhere. There's only three processing facilities, or countries, I should say, in the world that do rare earth elements. So they have a stranglehold on that. And though these rare earth elements are not necessarily in any volume within any product, without them, you can't make the product. So that's why they're critical. In regards to batteries, we may see this unfold as well. I'll give you an example. As last year, the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson joined the 2050 plan and talked about how by 2050, all vehicles, new and used, in the United Kingdom would be battery electric vehicles. Again, no mention of raw material. 2 weeks later, their department or Ministry of Resources came out, and just as an example, because we're talking about, they referred that the United Kingdom by themselves, in order to reach that objective, would require 2 times the current global production of cobalt.
Wow.
So that I hope puts it into perspective phenomenal. Of what type of supply problem there will exist. And at some point, unless there's more investment in producing the raw materials that are required, there's going to be a real crunch here.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is an interesting conversation. I'm just going to rope in Linda and Abdel here, because it makes one ask the questions. You know, everybody wants to see this happen. Africa has an opportunity to industrialize. The technology is there. So the fact that China is already processing and value adding African cobalt, lithium, manganese ore, and so forth, and prepping that for energy storage. I mean, by the way, I think for Africa in the short to medium term, and possibly for the foreseeable future, I see that energy storage is also going to be significantly in demand for wind energy storage, and for any even solar. I mean, the solar you're able to generate your energy during the day, and you've got to store it because you're not generating it at night. So I see the demand for these minerals, for these rare earth minerals, as critical for this continent. But if we continue to export raw ore, I can't imagine that we're going to see any industrialization, because that really is the opportunity, which beckons the next question to both the free trade concept of intra-trade. And I would want to pose a question to both Linda and Abdel to say, if we are to get a number of the amount of money required to enable Africa to convert all its raw materials into processed raw materials that have been beneficiated and various chemical processes have gone through, what is the capability of this continent to support that demand for innovation locally, so that we don't just ship out raw? Can I just to answer that?
Is that for me or Linda, or
for Linda or Abdel? Abdel, are you there?
Thanks,
Linda, go ahead.
thanks, Abdel.
Okay, Linda.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Owen.
Linda.
Maybe I'll start. I think our continent has a lot of potential. We, as Jay has noted, from a resource perspective, we are quite blessed. A potential we have. The areas of concern when it comes to trade within the continent has to do with infrastructure, has to do with our ability to move our commodities around in an efficient and cost-effective manner. That is, if you compare moving cargo within our continent, if you move anything within Europe or the Far East, on average, it takes you about 23 days. In Africa, if you move cargo within the African continent, you could even be looking at 3 months. Now, we have to ask ourselves, what creates that? The lack of appropriate infrastructure, the lack of supportive platforms for our manufacturers is the key problem that we need to address within our continent in order for us to be as efficient as Asia, as the Far East, basically. One of the things that we have found in our experience is that investors come to you looking for certain things. There are certain things that for any investors, they are a given. Power is a given. If you are in manufacturing, you must be able to secure power. If you are in manufacturing, you must be able to provide your investors with a reliable water supply, for an example. If you are manufacturing, you have to be able to provide your investors with an efficient logistics platforms whereby they can ship their cargo in efficiently, they can do just-in-time delivery onto their manufacturing plants, they can export them out, they can move them around, they are not delayed at the borders. One of our problems in Africa is that from a country-to-country perspective, which is one of the elements that will be cured by the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, is that we have various processes as you cross our borders. The processes that you have to abide by in South Africa, for an example, if you're coming through the southern tip of Africa, would be different than what you would face when you cross over to Zimbabwe, which is literally just a river away from us. So one of the things that we need to do is to almost standardize processes, make working more efficiently. If, for an example, you've cleared your cargo at a seaport and you're moving it inland, for that to be done efficiently with less time as possible. We also know that one of the killers of manufacturers in manufacturing in third world countries is actually the cost of and the burden of the supply chain. Because of the long lead times, they have to have extended buffers. They have to hold extended buffers, whereby in Europe, manufacturers hold 1 week's buffer stock, versus when manufacturing in South Africa, the norm is to hold at least 3 to 4 weeks buffer stock.
Yes.
And you can imagine
I've seen
that
that.
as you move into Upper Africa, into SADC and Upper Africa, those lead times from a buffer perspective are longer, which means that the manufacturer is then constrained. So we need to look at the elements that basically makes it easy, that eliminates what is termed as the non-tariff barriers, you know. So the non-tariff barriers are the real killers on the African continent, and that is the elements that we, as the Coega Development Corporation, try to make sure that we eliminate for our investors.
And
Oh,
Owen, if I
fantastic.
may, just to chime in there, Linda, thank you so much. Power is critical. When we talk about infrastructure, power is the one that has to be addressed for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know that the continent is overally has got a power deficit, but it differs across different countries in Africa. But it will be interesting to see if Afreximbank is funding across the country, or you're primarily focused on trade of commodities, goods and services.
Yeah, I'll also add there, when you're building out power, it's important to understand. Some people forget that electric car does not generate power; it's a store of power. So, example, when I'm speaking in China, I like to remind people that Tesla in China is the #1 coal-burning car on the planet. So it depends on the source of power. If you really want to make the whole supply chain and the whole infrastructure for battery electric vehicles green, you need to be focusing on some of those sustainable energies.
Yeah, it almost seems like a daunting task, because the question is, where do we start? And do we have the capacity? Because, I'm going to direct the next question to you, Abdel. So we are in a conundrum whereby Africa has to grow. As Africa grows, we are also becoming competitive with the rest of the world. But for Africa to grow significantly, we need foreign direct investment. In the absence of foreign direct investment, I think the other strategy is, let's increase intra-Africa trade. Okay, so whatever money is currently circulating within African borders, let's get it working. How are we going to achieve this growth when Africa doesn't have savings, financial ability to support these large infrastructure requirements, the beneficiation process? I mean, how far are we willing to go as financial institutions to support this transition? Abdel, will you just mind to give us some input there?
Thank you very much. I think Africa is a very rich continent. You know that over the past few years, remittances, inflows to Africa are much higher now than FDIs, inflows, or foreign official aids. So this is an area where we can actually play around and get the required funding for financing Africa's growth. The total reserves, foreign exchange reserves of Africa are in excess of $400 billion. So, this is a huge amount that could transform the African continent. So at Afreximbank, in 2016, we launched the Central African Central Bank Deposit Programs, where central banks in Africa can bring the foreign reserves and invest them in accounts with Afreximbank, and we managed to raise more than $10 billion. So the demand is there. So we can bring the African money to finance the growth. So this is not a big issue. It's just we need to have the right policies and the right financing schemes in place. And I'm really optimistic. I think that we are working toward this, whether in the context of the AfCFTA, when we go to the African unions, to the regional economic communities, meeting the African governments. So they are aware, they're working toward this, making sure that the financing is there in Africa to finance the growth of the African continents, but also avoid, the big issue we're having in Africa is the risk perception. International investors, they have this illusionary risk perception of the continent that we don't really think it's the real risk that should price the growth of the assets in Africa. So work is being done. It will take some time, maybe a few years, but we see the dynamic created by the AfCFTA We are coming there, so the money is coming back, the flows are coming back to Africa, and you know, if just give some examples of the amounts invested. We managed at Afreximbank to grow our balance sheet to about $20 billion, mostly loans and advances, in the span of just 3 or 4 years. So we can use programs like syndications, programs like risk sharings, guarantees, to leverage our own resources using external resources, and also managing this challenge of risk perception in Africa. Thank you.
That is very good news. I think I'm going to give you a round of applause for that one, because I really do think that the people around this continent and elsewhere around the world need to hear this, that there is money that can flow, that is already flowing into the continent. Earlier this year, I was to give a keynote, but owing to COVID, I wasn't able to travel to a conference in the US in California, which was being hosted by African Diaspora Network. And African Diaspora Network is a culmination of Africans who are in the diaspora globally. And one of the latest stats that I saw is that Africa has 210 million diaspora. So over and above the 1.3 billion strong population on the continent has an additional 250 million diaspora. And an interesting, conversation when I sat with an American pastor who's trying to get, his congregations in the African American community to start investing in Africa. He gave me an interesting statistic, which, I still have to verify at this point. But that statistic was that if the GDP, if the collective GDP of the African American population was to be calculated, it would culminate into the 8th largest economy in the world. So if that GDP was a country, it would be the 8th largest economy in the world. And, right now we are 400 years from when slavery was peaking on the continent. And I think that the recent events in the United States have led to an awakening of very difficult times in our past. And it's resurging the conversation of what is a just world. What do we need to do as a continent? What do we need to do as the world? What do global leaders need to do to embrace the idea of inclusion and people to not feel discredited because of color or gender or race or religion? I mean, this question continues to foster and to, and if you look at South Africa is one of the most diverse countries in the world. I think America might even fall behind, but South Africa got a population of 5 million Indians who historically came as a result of cheap labor from India into South Africa. You've got Cape Malay or coloureds who came into the Cape. You've got the original Khoi. You've got all the very different diverse backgrounds of Africans who've emerged. You've got North Africa, our North African community, which is in everything from your Sudan, you keep going up, your West African, and we are phenomenally diverse. But in that diversity, we've got to be able to find some strength. And I think that is
be able to celebrate who we are as Africans and celebrate who we are as South Africans. And we actually have a question that's just come through. It's from Willem, and Willem asked, to enable Africa's free trade plans, should we not have at the very least a connecting rail network to supplement our harbors? Maybe we can put this to Linda, perhaps, or Jay.
Thank you for that question. I'm in totally agreement. A rail network system is fundamental. It's one of the fundamental building blocks into opening up Africa. From a free trade agreement perspective, and even from the work that we do perspective, as I noted earlier, we do work in regions. We work in Zimbabwe. where we are overseeing 2 economic zones. And part of the work that we're doing that is that the logistics chain coupled by the railway line is fundamental in terms of our work. We are also operating in the Central African Republic, where we are present at the port of Douala. There as well, we are creating the transshipment hub that includes a railway line. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you very much,
thank you
Linda.
very
And
much.
thank you very much to the panel as well. Owen, Jay, Abdulaz, as well as Linda. I really appreciate it. It was great hearing your insights. And Jay, happy Halloween, right?
Yeah.
Happy
Right.
Halloween, Jay. And thank you so
Guys.
much, everyone.